have to have ICSI with IVF? It is not always necessary to have ICSI with IVF. There are certain clear indications where IVF would be performed, and there are certain clear indications where we would recommend performing ICSI or intracytoplasmic sperm insemination. IVF is generally recommended for patients who have been experiencing tubal factor infertility, or with couples who have had a history of conception in a recent past, or at least in the last 2 years, and have failed to conceive since then. We would then recommend again doing an IVF rather than an ICSI. On the other hand, if there are couples where the female partner has anovulation or lack of ovulation, then in that situation we once again may recommend performing an IVF rather than doing an ICSI. ICSI is generally recommended in patients with male factor infertility, or where couples have had unexplained infertility or unexplained subfertility for over 2 years duration, or even if they have had conceived before and have experienced unexplained subfertility of more than 2 years, we would once again recommend doing ICSI. ICSI may also be performed in certain patients where there is a total absence of the sperms in the ejaculate, and we have retrieved the sperms following a surgical sperm recovery, then ICSI would definitely be required. These are the broad indications where we would recommend doing an IVF or doing an ICSI in the patients. In IVF, the process involves first, the women have to take fertility drugs or medicine to stimulate the development of multiple follicles, and these follicles are then tracked. Once it's considered that the eggs are mature enough and are ready for collection, then you would undergo a procedure called an egg collection. It's a minor surgical procedure. We retrieve the eggs. As part of IVF, we would inseminate the eggs, leave the eggs of the sperms in the petri dish, and the fertilization happens naturally. The embryologist will perform the checks next day to confirm fertilization. However, with ICSI, what will be done is the embryologist will prepare and centrifuge the sample, select the healthy-looking sperms under the microscope, which has a high magnification microscopes, and then inject a healthy-looking sperm into one mature egg. Only one sperm is injected into each mature eggs. And by doing this, we are facilitating the entry of the sperm into the egg. In some cases, we may recommend doing IMSI or intracytoplasmic morphologically selected sperm insemination. That is generally the cases where we have experienced very low fertilization rates after having performed ICSI. So this is the kind of the broad difference in between an IVF and an ICSI. Patients undergoing IVF has to go through the full process just like an IVF. Why should not everyone have ICSI rather than having an IVF to give themselves the best possible chance, and whether a human judgment in selecting the sperm can affect the outcome of the treatment. Most of these assisted reproductive technology procedures still involves a lot of use of external interventions, chemicals, and therefore one has to be careful what procedure are required. I think what is very important to have a judicious use of the procedures. In ICSI, when there is a human judgment involved, there is a small potential that probably we might not have picked up a healthier sperm. Whether we have picked up a not so healthy sperm, I think it's difficult to judge because the assessment is more morphological rather than functional. So therefore, that's one of the reasons we should avoid if the procedure is not indicated. The other aspect is there is still a slight increase in birth defects in babies born following ICSI. What we don't understand at this given point of time, whether it's the underlying cause of male infertility that contributes to the increase in the birth defects, or whether it is the procedure in itself can lead to the birth defects on its own. Thirdly, we also have a new area of the medicine that is now coming up is epigenetics. Epigenetics is where lots of external interventions have been used, and here the embryos are being exposed to the external environment and the chemicals that can in itself induce mutations and genetic changes and can lead to the abnormalities. So one has to be very judicious and careful in recommending and performing ICSI or IVF. It should only be used for the patients as is clinically indicated.